Hello and welcome to another episode of Half Court Press. He's Wilson Moore. I'm Jon Walker. We're gonna steal your ears for about the next half hour or so. So thanks for tuning in. Haven't had anything too crazy since the last time we talked. Certainly not as much as the last episode. But we still had quite a bit happen, Wilson. But before we dive into that, before we talk about a couple of Creighton NBA players now, before we talk about an off-season update in Lincoln, how are you, man?
I'm doing pretty well. Hey, glad to be back talking about basketball. We've both had College World Series stuff the past couple weeks. That was kind of fun. I don't know about you. That was my first experience with that. So
Yeah, same here.
pretty neat. Yeah, some totally different. Nice little off season thing to kind of keep the wheels turning. Keep you from getting too stagnant.
Yeah, no, it was nice. Admittedly, baseball is not my like favorite sport. And that's okay. Like it's for certain people, right? Baseball as a sport is not for me. But I did thoroughly enjoy covering the World Series because yeah, it was different. I'd never experienced it before. Um, and I appreciated this all the stories that came along with it, whether it was, from the crowd or with the players. It was really cool. It was really cool. I'm looking forward to next year. Um, but yeah, man, you kind of mentioned it. We're here to talk basketball because we have some basketball news. Thank the basketball gods. So let's just kind of start recapping some stuff that's already happened before we, at the end of the episode, mention some things that will happen this fall with both Creighton and Nebraska. Wilson, Baylor Shireman, no longer a Creighton Blue Jay. He is a Boston Celtic. Um, for anybody who's lived under a rock, Baylor Shireman was taken with the 30th overall pick. Otherwise, the last pick in the first round of this year's NBA draft. Waited and waited and waited all night. And at the 11th hour, here's his name called and is selected by the now defending NBA champion Boston Celtics. Wilson, if there was a team in the league that any rookie period could get drafted to, which one of them wouldn't have picked the Celtics?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, these guys are natural competitors. They want to play for winners. The Celtics have done that and they'll continue to do that, run it back with pretty much the same core. I think it's a good fit for Baylor. They're in today's NBA. If you can't do anything but shoot, that's still something. There is
Yeah.
no team that is ever going to say in 2024, we've got too much 3-point shooting. We don't know what we're going to do with this. So I think good spot for Baylor. He'll be somewhere that he won't have to, carry a huge load early in his career, and that's perfect for him. He can be a spot up shooter. He can take advantage of all the attention that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown draw on that team and
Yeah.
just be the guy who stretches the floor, keeps the defense honest, probably comes in and helps buoy the second unit and knocks down shots, which we know he's more than capable of doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's they took the most threes in the NBA last year. Had I believe like the second best percentage. So we're talking about a team that shoots them a lot and hits them a lot. And when you think of Baylor Shireman's time in college, whether it was South Dakota State or at Creighton, especially at Creighton, he's going to shoot a lot of threes. He's going to hit a lot of threes. And yeah, so it just always seemed like it fit. Um, yeah, I think that was the biggest thing. There were a couple of other teams that were there at the back end of the first round that he worked out for and could have gone to. One of them was the Jazz. There were some rumblings about maybe the Jazz. No, nobody really knew where Baylor Shireman was going to fall. Nobody really knew how this draft was going to play out. Um, we obviously saw the age thing kind of come into question when Dalton Connect slid as far as he did. In no world, in my opinion, is Dalton Connect as the 17th overall pick. And I think we saw Baylor slide a little bit, kind of in that same for that same reason. Again, he's happy that he's a Celtic. I'm sure the Celtics are happy that he is as well. But one of those teams that had maybe considered trading up to get him was the Utah Jazz. They had 29 and 32. So that's one of those scenarios where you say, okay, maybe we think Minnesota's going to take him at 27. We'll trade up and get to, I don't know, 23, 24. They didn't have to do that. They went elsewhere. They took a forward, kind of a swingman with their lottery pick, I believe at 14. And so that was kind of the moment I was like, okay, Baylor's probably not going to Utah. Like, surely they're not going to take two sharpshooting swingmen in the first round of the draft. But that would have been one of those situations where, yeah, you're going to have a chance to start, uh, or at least push for really good minutes off rip. So, like, there are so few examples, at least that come to mind, of that working out for younger talent, for rookies. So yeah, that point that you mentioned, the fact that he doesn't have to carry a load, really. Like, yeah, he might buoy the second unit. He's not going to have to shoulder everything on the second unit. And that's good. That's good for Baylor Shireman. It's good for any rookie, but good for Baylor Shireman landing in that situation. The funny thing was Wilson. So I was at Let It Fly. He did like a watch party at one of the bars downtown Omaha. Um,
Well, wanted to ask you about that.
yeah, yeah. I
What,
mean,
yeah, for anyone who hasn't read John's excellent story from the night Baylor was drafted.
thanks, dog.
Yeah, you're welcome. We like positivity on this podcast. But anyway, yeah, I was gonna ask, what was that like? What was the mood in there as he's
Yeah,
waiting to hear his name called, and gets a little hairy toward the end of
yeah,
the first round.
yeah. No, so I got there. I got there as the draft was starting. I knew that Baylor wasn't going to go top five, so I was like, I'll straggle in casually late or right on time in this instance, I suppose. Um, yeah.
Every
So
NBA thing starts 10 to 12 minutes later
exactly,
than
exactly, yeah,
it's
exactly,
typical.
exactly, exactly. So get there. Everyone's vibing, everyone loves it. Um, that's kind of the mood throughout the night. Everyone's just sitting, Greg McDermott's there and his family's there. And, so many people are here to celebrate Baylor that not even all of them knew him, which I'm not saying that like facetiously or anything. I think that's genuinely funny. Like, I was standing next to one dude watching the draft and he tapped me on the shoulder and he was like, "Hey man, what's his name again?" And I was like, "This is good." So that's how many people were there to celebrate Baylor Shireman. And so everyone's vibing, and then picks kind of 20-ish get on the board, and everyone's a little on edge because we know there's only 10 picks left, and Baylor could go, Baylor could not go. Who really knows? And yeah, let's see, 27 was the Wolves, 28 was the Nuggets, but they traded the pick to Phoenix. 29 was the Jazz, and 30 was the Celtics. Okay, so that's how it played out, just to paint the picture. He worked out for all four of those teams, but he worked out for the Nuggets, not the Suns, that is. So we knew since they'd already traded the pick, they weren't going to take him. Timberwolves, he was mocked to a good amount, and they didn't take him. And so then you're standing there with the Jazz and Celtics, and his last workout was with the Jazz. Heard he crushed it. Again, there was always the possibility we thought that they could trade up. And so it was, oh, they're at 29. Maybe they take him. Then again, are they going to take two swingmen, in the first round? Probably not. And so that goes off the board, and you have one pick left. And it's quiet, man. I mean, it was quiet. You could just imagine. and Baylor Shireman standing there next to Greg McDermott. And Mackey gets a phone call and looks at Baylor and nods, and boom, that was it. We were on. Baylor kind of dips to the viewing area they had set up for him on the other side of the building. His family pops into the room. Everyone crowds into this room to watch the moment. Um, that ended up being pretty special. So it was really cool. Um, but I think everyone in there, and I even talk about it in that story, Baylor included. They were like, okay, maybe he's going in the second. They just kind of accepted it. And again, at the 11th hour, Brad Stevens, old friend of the Big East, um, you know, pulls the strings, and here we are. Baylor Shireman is a Boston Celtic. So yeah, it was nuts. It was nuts. I talked to Greg McDermott that night, and he said, I just kind of asked him what Trey was doing for his watch party. I don't know if everybody knows this. He was like, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow morning and flying down to Oklahoma City, like to watch to be with Trey. For anybody who doesn't know, Trey Alexander was not selected in this year's draft. With one of the 58 picks, a little bit different of a draft. Two teams had their second round picks forfeited. Can't remember which ones, but who knows? Is Trey Alexander selected with 59 or 60? Who knows? I don't know. Does it make that big of a difference? No. Those last 10 picks, people say you'd almost rather go undrafted, so you can kind of pick and choose what situation you want to go into. And that's kind of the luxury that Trey had. He ends up with the Denver Nuggets, signed with them as an undrafted free agent minutes after the draft ended. And so he's in Denver on a two-way contract now. So we'll see what happens there. But both of Creighton's NBA prospects are in one way or another now on NBA rosters. So pretty cool for them.
Yeah, and that's a good spot for Trey too. Obviously, Denver's a good organization, but even just being on a two-way deal is not the worst thing in the
No.
world. There are a lot of guys who are signing summer league contracts who are going to be fighting for roster spots. Being on a two-way deal, there's a certain amount of stability there. Obviously, if you're a guy on there, you're hoping to get your shot eventually, have that converted into a standard NBA contract, but you're going to be employed for the next year or two. You're going to be playing professional basketball, making good money, regardless of
Yeah.
where you spend more of your time.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't know if everybody's like clear on like some people are like what the heck is a two-way contract? It's like so it pretty how you see those baseball players, maybe not speaking to you directly, Wilson, because I assume but
Yeah,
the baseball players when you see them, oh, he's been called up to Kansas City, and the next day he's sent back to Omaha, and the next day he's in Kansas City. Yeah, it pretty much like to a degree caps an NBA team's ability to do that every single game. So two-way contract means that Trey Alexander is essentially going to split time, mostly in the G League, I'm assuming. But he'll be called up to the Nuggets active roster, or can be called up to the Nuggets active roster for a maximum of 50 games next year. So that's kind of where he stands. Again, kind of a situation, very different situations, but similar to Baylor in the sense that you don't have these real crazy, lofty expectations out the gate, which, is kind of here nor there. That's different for everyone. Some people want that, um, and some people want it. But like again, it's different than Baylor, very different, but similar in the sense that Trey Alexander is going to be able to develop in the G League and make money, um, and sometimes who knows be called up and have a chance at slim minutes on the Nuggets roster. So it's there. I think we obviously have to ask the question. I don't think we would be doing this thing right, Wilson, if we didn't. should Trey Alexander have come back to school? That's kind of the age-old question, um, because it's so odd. It's so odd. We talk about the era of college, like this era of college athletics. There's a chance. I don't know what the salary number is for the G League or for a two-way contract this upcoming season because I think it changes every year. There's a realistic scenario, like there's a very real argument to be made where you say, yeah, Trey Alexander could have developed, in the Big East as much as he had in the G League, and then maybe he has a better chance as a prospect next year. And maybe he'd get paid more in NIL. He would have gotten paid more in NIL coming back to Creighton than he would in the G League. I don't know. Um, but I do know he was set on the NBA. We've talked about this in previous episodes. He long has called it a lifelong dream. You usually are chomping at the bit to get at your lifelong dream. So I think that's kind of what happened here. Unfortunate. Greg McDermott came out and said, I thought Trey was good enough to be drafted, but he'll make the most of his opportunity. We've got Dylan with an assist right here. Okay, 580,000 is the minimum for a two-way this year. I don't know if he was getting that at Creighton.
Yeah, that's probably stretching the limits of
Yeah,
a private school collective like Creighton.
no, for sure, for sure. So I don't know if he'd have got that at Creighton. Probably not. Like, probably not. So that changes things, obviously. But yeah, who knows, man? That, like I said, the question's been out there, right? It's been asked all off season. And so who knows? Who knows?
Who knows?
Let's dive into some Nebraska things.
Let's
Husker
do it.
fans, welcome to the podcast. welcome to this week's episode. Wilson, you've put out a couple of stories over the last couple of days. I've not read your notes from Thursday, but I did read the one on B Will. And what were they on the car speaker? Or on the
Um, well,
what was it?
we never saw it from we only heard Bryce's voice, but we do know from that video that Bryce Williams and Jawan Gary put out to announce they're coming back that Bryce is in Jawan's contracts as Bryce Will 100 emoji, which is
Bryce
just
Will. Okay, I couldn't remember if it was B Will, Bryce
fantastic.
Will 100. Yeah, that's good. That's good. But you wrote a really good story on them and their first comments since announcing that?
Yeah, first we've heard of first we've heard from anyone since the end of the season. I mean, I had a story. I talked on the phone with Fred Hoiberg, and he's been on the radio. So we got a little bit from him. But yeah, first time we've spoken to players since Memphis.
What what would you learn that you didn't already know from Juwan Gary and Bryce Williams about their return? And we'll just save it there. We'll stop there and then we'll dive into the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean that they talked about it that night. I don't think we knew that they were roommates at their hotel in Memphis and they came back and talked about it that night. What do you want to do? What are we gonna do? They officially made the decision a few weeks later. I think it's notable that those were the two we spoke to. That in our
Yeah.
first time speaking with players, it was Bryce Williams and Jawan Gary. We saw last year. I think Josiah Alec and Rink Mast were kind of the team spokesmen, if you will. They were the veterans who they could speak for themselves, but they were also the guys who would speak on behalf of the team. They were the
Yeah.
ones who, if Nebraska got blown out, that's who they would be the ones to stand in front of the microphones and say we needed to do better. And I think they're both gone. I mean, well, they're with the program, but neither of them are playing. Josiah is a grad assistant. Rink is rehabbing his knee after having surgery, so they're not as much in the picture this year. And I think we see that those guys are going to be Bryce Williams and Jawan Gary this year. They're the veterans. They're the sixth-year seniors. They're going to be the guys who are looked to set the tone a little more than last year. They're going to be the guys who I think take on some of that leadership responsibility from Rink Mast and Josiah Alec. It's an interesting dynamic because
Yeah.
I don't think it's something that totally comes naturally to either of them. I wrote features on both these guys last year, and they're both a little more just natural introverts. And they talked about that yesterday, that they've had to make something of a conscious effort to be that guy, be the veteran leader, be the senior leader that the coaching staff is looking for them to be. So yeah, it was a you're not going to get a ton groundbreaking information when you're talking to someone on July 2nd. We were 4 months away from any meaningful basketball being played, but that was my biggest takeaway, that this is, like last year, it will be an ensemble production for Nebraska. I think that was one of their strengths a season ago, that they had, reasonably like seven guys who were probably the best player on the court at different times throughout the season. It will be like that again this year. There's no, superstar. There's no one who's going to average 25 points a game, but it's their team. And I thought that was my biggest takeaway from yesterday.
I thought when I read your story, I found that really interesting, and I pocketed the question for the episode because yeah, we didn't really have any clue that they decided in the hours following the NCAA tournament loss. Excuse me. How much of the timing do you think played a factor in the eventual decision to return? For example, if they had waited I know they officially decided a couple of weeks later, but if they had just gone back to their hotel room that night and closed their eyes and went to bed, and you have that conversation 2 weeks later for the first time, you don't have the man, I don't want to feel this way again. Man,
Yeah.
we have unfinished business. Man, we have, yeah, you name it. How much of the timing aspect do you think played a part in their collective decision to return?
That's an interesting question. I didn't really think about that, but that's a good point. I can say I thought the day, in the immediate, 30 minutes after that game, I was pretty sure Jawan was coming back. I
Yeah,
talked to him in the locker room, and he basically said, I still gotta make a decision, but I like playing here. I like playing for Fred Hoiberg. I like Lincoln. Like he said all that and kind of had, but I still need to like talk to my family and just make sure
right.
I'm doing.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah, I think they're in a similar position of, neither of them are really looked at as NBA prospects, but they could be if they have good seasons, especially Bryce. You look at what the NBA looks for these days, and a 6'7" wing who shoots 38% from three and is a good
That'll
on ball
work.
defender. Yeah, that's a guy who's going to get some looks. I think, neither of them were there. Jawan, it's just, if he can consistently make jump shots, which we saw him do at times, but not, we saw games where he could do that, then suddenly he's
Yeah.
a guy who can, who's athletic, plays super hard, out rebounds his size. So I think they're both guys who can really, make one last push for to try to make the NBA, which so many guys dreams. And I think they're happy with their situation at the moment. I think they're comfortable in Lincoln. They found a good spot that a coaching staff they like playing for, a place that's good for their development, a program that is coming off its best season, and that's where that to your point, where that fits in, where they see a chance to take another step to be the guys. And I can tell you, last year's team really, really wanted just like collectively to be the group that finally won a tournament
Yeah.
game. And that's the big thing I think of when I think of like the locker room after that Texas A&M game, is just the frustration and the disappointment of the guys in there. And that's because they really wanted to be the ones who did it. And I think, that applies to Jawan and to Bryce. And I think that's certainly another factor in their return.
Yeah. That wasn't the only thing you learned yesterday, or the only people you talked to. You guys got Fred as well, right?
We did not get Fred. No,
Oh, you didn't get Fred?
no, just
Man,
yeah.
look, see if I would have
Fred's taking it easy. Fred,
yeah. It's their time, it's the holiday week, it's their time of
yeah.
year off. I don't think recruiting's quieted down, but we could
No,
say it
yeah,
is this
yeah.
week,
He
sure.
Fred's been all over the country and
Yeah.
especially the Midwest in the past couple weeks. I will say one other thing we learned about we learned as they both mentioned freshman Nick Janowski as a guy um who they've noticed. I think Bryce Williams, there's a direct quote is dude doesn't get tired. And that's I think what Nebraska was expecting from Nick Janowski. You watch just like his highlights from high school in Wisconsin, and he's a guy who's he's making shots and he's going back on defense and clapping and yelling and like he's a gamer. I think that was clear. And then now the guys on Nebraska are seeing it. The guys who are quite a bit older than him when you consider the COVID years and the red shirts. Braden Frager, who isn't doing a whole lot because he has a wrist injury right now. His name came up too. Jawan talked about how much he likes Braden Frager. Apparently, Jawan recently found out he was one of Braden's favorite players on the team last year because Braden Frager, Lincoln Southwest guy, Nebraska basketball fan up until he joined the team. He's also a guy who, when Jawan Gary was a senior in high school, Braden Frager was in sixth grade, and they are now teammates. That is just a perfect storm of COVID year and redshirt year and
Yeah.
reclassifying. And yeah, you got a guy 6 years younger than some of his teammates on this team.
6 years younger, man. That's nuts. I'm trying to think, yeah, I don't know if Creighton will have that. I think Ryan Kalkbrenner is only 23. Freshmen should all be 18 by now. Nobody
Yeah, yeah,
reclassed.
that's the thing. Braden's 17 because he
Uh-huh.
reclassified.
That's nuts. That's nuts. So is he still a Nebraska basketball fan? You said
I mean, I
until he
guess
joined the team.
I guess I do you is it possible to be a fan and a player, or do you lose your fandom when you join the program?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I hope somebody gives us an answer on
Yeah.
this.
I
Yeah,
mean,
do you
I guess if we're defining like fan by someone who hopes the team wins, then yes, he
right.
is still a fan. Everyone on the team is a fan because they want the team to win.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
when you're on the bench, you're a fan, but when you're on the floor, you're a player. Does it
Are you,
shift?
are you still a fan when you're on the I don't know.
Maybe you
I
are
don't
because
know.
you still want the team to win. These are off-season discussions. This is a July
Yeah.
3rd
Yeah.
conversation.
Oh my man. We're gonna make this a July 3rd conversation too. We're we're 4 months out from meaningful basketball, as you said, but we have Creighton's non-con schedule now officially released. We're waiting on Nebraska's non-con schedule, which we anticipate to be somewhat similar to last year's in terms of strength of schedule. Um, but but Wilson, the Huskers do have some schedule news of sorts. That's how we'll cap the episode. But let's dive into Creighton's non-con schedule. Starts with 5 straight home games. I've mentioned this in every story I've written about it. Starts with 5 straight home games, and it features at least two title contenders, preseason title contenders. It's going to start with Texas Rio Grande Valley on November 6th. That's opening night, man. So that'll be fun, I suppose. And then it'll be Fairleigh Dickinson, FDU, the team that upset Purdue a couple of years ago. They'll come to Omaha. And then Houston Christian, which I've got to give a shout out to their first year head coach, Craig Doty, who was formerly at Emporia State. So love to see Division Two represented
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah, for
Um,
real.
and then it'll be UMKC, then Nebraska. Those are the first 5 games of the season for Creighton. Um, I think that right there is a perfectly built chunk to be able to say, yeah, we have a lot of questions. We know we'll have Stephen Ashworth. We know we'll have Ryan Kalkbrenner. We also have two immediate impact transfers who we need to see how they fit. We have three really impressive freshmen who we need to see where they fit. And then they're returning guys like Jason Green, like Isaac Trout, um, like Mason Miller, So they've got to figure out how all of these pieces fit together. I think those first four games are really good games to figure that out before you get, I don't know. I don't know if you'd say you're comparative on this non-con schedule. Probably not, but I'd say the Jays get their first real test in that Nebraska game in mid-November. Um, yeah, is it Kansas? No. Is it Alabama? No. But after four to figure things out, you'll get a good test in Nebraska. And then they go to the Players Era Festival, the inaugural Players Era Festival. They'll play Oregon to start it, and then they'll play one of Texas A&M or San Diego State in the second game in Vegas. And then who know their third and final opponent of that event will come from the other 14 bracket. So is it Alabama? Is it Houston? So that's why I said at least two title contenders, because if you got to play Houston or if you have to play Alabama twice, I mean, the strength of schedule would be nuts. So then they'll get back from that, and the Jays will host Kansas. They'll host UNLV, and they'll close non-con by heading to Tuscaloosa to play the Crimson Tide. So a pretty loaded non-con schedule for the Jays. And I think the biggest thing is Greg McDermott built this in a way that lets him experiment before they really, really, really get going. And then I think when they get back from, I don't know, I guess it'd start in Vegas, really. They'll do the Players Era Festival. They'll get some really good competition out there. And then they come back and, play Kansas and Alabama in the span of 13 days. And if those 3 weeks between the Players Era Festival and the Alabama game, if those don't get you ready to open Big East play, I don't know what will.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I think the schedule, I genuinely believe for this team in particular, the schedule is built perfectly.
Yeah, that's it's a gauntlet. That
Yeah, it
I mean,
is.
just the idea of playing Alabama twice, which I know a lot of things would have to happen, but
Right.
man, that
Yeah, yeah, or say they get, like I said, say they get Houston. Then, oh my goodness, then you play Houston, Bama and Kansas. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's nuts. Okay, so
and
they'd play. So the other 14 bracket is Bama, Houston, Rutgers, and Notre Dame. So you're going to get good competition either way. Not to mention you're going to play either Texas A&M or San Diego State as well. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting non-con, a really tough one, a good one I think for Creighton. When I talked to Greg McDermott in May, I just asked him. They hadn't even announced half of these yet, obviously. We just knew about the Alabama return trip in the Kansas game, in the Nebraska game, obviously. And I just asked him, like, how about the non-con? And he like laughed and he was like, yeah, this will probably be the hardest non-con schedule that we've played. Um, and yeah, I wouldn't really argue. I've looked through a few and like there's been some really good ones. And they've continued to ramp up over the last handful of years, especially. But I mean, to be, in the Players Era Festival with national championship caliber teams on that stage, and then to certifiably, not in an event, to certifiably be playing two title contenders, it's gonna tell them who they are early.
yeah, most
That was
definitely will.
that was Greg McDermott's thing, and I think I'm going to stick to that. All right, Wilson, we've got Nebraska basketball to look forward to as well, because the Huskers are going to head what north?
North to South
Um,
Dakota, oddly
yeah,
enough.
north to. That's why I was like, wait a second. Yeah, north to South Dakota for a game at the illustrious Sanford Pentagon.
Yeah, that place is cool. They played there last year. I was there last year. That place, it's pretty small and compact, and because of that, it can get loud. And
Yeah,
it'll be 95% Nebraska fans again this year. They're playing St. Mary's, second year in a row. They've played a West Coast school, which, there's not going to be a lot of travel there from to South Dakota in
that's a game for the
November.
locals, man.
Yeah, it's for the locals. Little better competition this year. Last year it was Oregon State. It was not very good despite being Power Five. This year it's St. Mary's, a very good West Coast Conference school. I think that'll, we talked about how Nebraska had a pretty light non-conference schedule last
Yeah,
year and probably going to do the same again this year. That'll be one. That'll be a big one. That'll be one that you
yeah.
look at going into Big Ten play and you use that as kind of a measuring stick. Like, all right, how good is this team? How good can this team be against St. Mary's? Which we were talking about. This is what is a gale like a bird? Like
That's a, that's a good question.
sounds like a bird. What?
What's a gale?
But anyway, as they play St. Mary's, I think that'll be one of the kind of premier non-conference games they play along with Creighton. And the women are playing as well the day before, I believe. They'll play South Dakota. First time Amy Williams, I think, coached in South Dakota, which is where she's from and where she went to school, since coming to Nebraska. So big weekend of Nebraska hoops in
Yeah,
November, a couple of games, and then the Sanford Pentagon.
yeah, man. Okay, so I have an answer for you, Wilson. So this is on St. Mary's ca.edu.
They
This
have
is
a
from
whole
the source.
thing. Okay,
This is from the source. In the simplest terms, a Gael is an Irish person.
okay, I like
So,
Gaelic.
the Irish, yep, the Irish speak Gaelic.
Yeah.
Legend has it that in the 1920s, famous sports writer, love to see it, Grantland Rice named
Okay.
St. Mary's the Gales because there were so many Irish guys on the team.
Okay, that's fun. Like that's a fun backstory.
That is a fun backstory. So now in I don't know, I'm assuming that'll be in November, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, in
I
November.
think there's an exact date.
Um, when somebody asks, "What is a Gale?" you'll have an
On top,
answer.
an Irish person. I mean,
It's
specifically not even an Irish person, but like someone on St. Mary's at this very specific point in time. That's
yeah, multiples of them,
yeah,
allegedly.
yeah. That's fun. That's a fun backstory.
Yeah, no, that'll be good. Basketball wise, it'll be really good for Nebraska. Yeah, I think they're gonna be. What event are they going to? Not
One of the Hawaii ones, but
yeah, I couldn't remember
not
which one.
Maui.
Not Maui,
It's
the
around
Baja
Christmas. It's
Mars or something.
something like that. It might have the word holiday somewhere in there because it's right
Nah, I
around
don't know.
Christmas. I think it's the week
Yeah, I
of.
don't. That will assumedly have a couple of matchups or at least one that boosts their non-con strength of
Yeah.
schedule. So they're going to have these scattered. But to think that, Nebraska is going to schedule Alabama in a return trip, like, no, not going to happen. And so that St. Mary's matchup is going to be really important in a way. Because if you're going to only get a couple, I'm assuming at max, like, including the Creighton game, four cracks at like really good teams in non-con, you want to make the most of them. You have to. So yeah, we'll just kind of we'll see what happens. Good for Nebraska though. Good for Fred for getting that worked out. Is that an annual thing? Do they usually do something at the Pentagon?
No, last year was the first time in I think like 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
And I think everyone liked it enough. Everyone enjoyed going to the Pentagon. They liked the fan support they got out there. I think it was really popular for kind of a road trip with fans as well. I think everyone enjoyed it enough, players, coaches, fans, that they said, let's do it again this year.
Yeah. I was in we mentioned D2. I mentioned D2 earlier in the episode. I was in the last time I was in the Sanford Pentagon was for a Division 2 basketball regional. Um, and Trevor Hudgens hit like a half court shot right before halftime. Like he was like 10 feet behind the 3-point line. Of course he was. Um, he just nailed it at the buzzer. They're playing Augustana.
Augustana. Okay, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, there's
Yep.
yeah, that's where Augustana is, obviously. And that's
Right.
the yeah, they also host the Pentagon, I believe, is the host of the NSIC tournament, which is the Northern Sun with D2
Yeah.
teams and
Yeah,
like
baby.
Southern Minnesota and the Dakotas.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Mm-mm-mm. D1, D2, I'll watch it if it's basketball.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness. You have any parting words, Wilson?
I don't think so. We covered a lot of ground for July.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully nothing else too crazy happens.
Yeah.
Um, well, I know you've got some time off this month.
Yep, and you do as
I've got
well.
some I've got some time off this month. And so hopefully nothing crazy happens and that we can hop on here again in peace.
We can hope.
Yeah. Mm-mm-mm. That's going to do it for this episode of Half Court Press. As always, you can go find my content, Wilson's content, all of our content over at omaha.com and Huskers Extra. That's going to do it for this episode of Half Court Press. We'll talk to you guys next time. Peace.